Great, awesome. Well, then we'll go ahead and get started. So first, I think it would be great to do a round of introductions. So if you could just state your name for everyone, and then what your organization does, what you do at that organization, to help our students get a general picture of who's talking to them today. So Dixon, could we start with you? You're on this side of my screen. So
Yeah, for sure. Dixon Dabs with Air Compressor Services. We provide parts for industrial air compressors to customers across the nation. And then we provide service in manufacturing facilities, other industrial facilities in South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. And I
great.
manage our service team, so field service out working in the field, and then also for our shop services where we're doing overhauls, rebuilds, that kind of work.
Mm, so thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Deetra Helvey with Greenville County Schools. I am a teacher recruitment specialist, but let me also say, in addition to that, I work closely with our classified hiring department, other components of human resources and hiring. And so I am here and ready to kind of give feedback from the lens of a recruiter in general for the Greenville Tech students today. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Deidre. And any one folk from AnMed. I know we've got a couple of you here.
Oh, sure. Well, I'll start. I'm Nedra Brown. I am from Nursing Services. I work currently as the Assistant Vice President for Women's and Children's Services and Orthopedics. So I manage bones and babies all day, and it actually does work well together. I've been at MF for 23 years, and I recruit and retain employees who work in maternity services, which would include labor and delivery, nursery and mom baby, and adult surgical and inpatient pediatrics. And so my HR business partners are the ones who help recruit, we interview, and hope to regain some talent that will become long-term tenure employees in the health system here.
Awesome. Super great stuff. Thank y'all so much for being here today. I think we should go ahead and get started with the first question, which is, what makes a candidate's application stand out in a large pool of applicants? I get this question a lot when I'm meeting with students, so whoever wants to chime in first.
Well, I like to look for job fit. I always tell candidates that when I'm interviewing you, I'm not necessarily looking to see if you know everything. I'm interested to see if this particular role could help be a good job fit for you, so that you can succeed and thrive. And so when I'm looking at resumes, I typically look at unique things that they may have mentioned that they have done in the past that may not be specific to the current job that they are applying for. But a lot of times you can use skills that are outside of what you're applying for that could be applicable to grow in this kind of environment.
And I would agree totally with Ms. Brown. And as we're looking at the application and looking at the resume, we're looking at how your resume tells a story about you. Can I make those connections in your resume, whether it be whichever profession you're going into? Do you have some experiences that tie in to what we're looking for? Or is it a unique situation where I'm looking and seeing some components of your application or resume that I feel like, okay, this candidate would be great for this position? And then from my lens, I'm thinking, let me try to suggest maybe going down a certain pathway as well when I'm looking at what you're bringing to the table and how can we enhance that. So that's one of the things that I'm looking for when we have such a large pool of candidates and trying to narrow it down to make sure it's customized for the applicant.
Yeah, I would add to that as well. It don't I think a lot of I always heard like, oh, you should cater your resume to like what you're applying. I don't know that that's always the best advice because you not knowing what the company's looking for. I can tell you that we've had folks who've applied for us. They had worked at Chick-fil-A along like maybe several jobs back, but we still see that and we're like, okay, that's great. We know that they've had that experience. I think too, the consistent work history, even if it is a job that maybe isn't as relevant for the position you're applying for, we want to see that you were working. We want to see how long you were there. We want to see a cleaner transition between jobs. And so, especially for students coming out, I'd say that, hey, if you did something, and we especially if if you're building that resume, we still want to see it. We want to know. We'd rather see that than a big gap, even if it was like, hey, I was working at Papa Bear Car Wash. I'm like, well, you probably dealt with angry customers. That's something that's helpful for me to see, even if you're applying now to be a service technician. So,
You know, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because I get a lot of questions too, and I'm having to think about and remember who my audience is. That the candidates will say, how long should my resume be? How long should that application be? You know, I'm just starting out. Well, we know that you're not going to have a 3-page, resume just starting out. So it's good. I like that you mentioned that, Dixon, about the Chick-fil-A, because when I see Chick-fil-A listed, I'm thinking you had some very good training in your high
right.
school years and maybe your college, and that's going to come over and sprinkle over to us as well. So I'm glad that you pointed that out.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to see such an intentional perspective from all three of you. We love talking about transferable skills with our students, so it's great to hear that. Thank you. So following up, how can students show that they are reliable, that they're ready for the workforce, even if they haven't had that full-time job, if they don't have that 10 years of experience to back them up, how can they show in just their application materials that they're reliable and ready?
I think it's good for applicants to be as transparent as possible when they apply. Sometimes a good introduction letter as to what led you to apply can often be helpful so that we can see maybe some of where your passion lies, where some of your goal settings are. A lot of times in certain work environments, it requires a certain unique type of passion that you may have that doesn't necessarily display in your application, but in a description about yourself and your personal passions can also invite someone who is reviewing that resume to want to pull you in to talk further.
Yeah, I'll kind of give a little example that kind of hits from home too. Um, had an experience with a student that went through welding and fresh out of the program with welding, but then has the question of, you know what, it's really hard for me to get that one job that I really want because I don't have the professional experience. And so for me, giving advice of, well, you just need to make sure that when you're in that interview or having those discussions that you talk about the internships that you may have had, that you talk about your passion for wanting to continue on this track of welding, but just as was mentioned, just talking about those experiences and that passion of what you want to do and what you plan on doing if given the opportunity, I think really stands out to an employer when you're interviewing because they know that your experience is limited and that you have to start somewhere.
Mm. And I would even say too, those are good points you both made, but also what you may have done in high school, even as far as like extracurricular activities, like if you've played a sport, maybe been the team captain, seeing that on a resume sparks our interest too, because we know, hey, they've had some leadership experience, or hey, they're probably a good team player. It also shows your dedication if you've done it for throughout high school and that type of thing. So seeing those as well is a good thing to see, as to speak to your reliability as well.
Awesome. Thank y'all. And so what advice would you have for a candidate if they didn't meet all of your listed qualifications? What should they do? Should they apply and throw themselves out there, or would you encourage against it? I think we've sort of touched on this, but I still want to ask.
From an education world, yes, I'm going to say absolutely apply anyways. But if there's some specific certifications, some specific qualifications that you must have, as a recruiter, I'm going to take the time to reach out to you and say, hey, well, you really need to have XYZ, but can we maybe have you thought about this path? Or here's something else that I see that might be a better fit for you right now until I can help you get on the pathway of meeting those qualifications. So definitely apply anyway, because that also helps you to kind of network and to be able to follow up with that hiring manager and to just continue to show your interest in that position.
I say apply. And definitely that's where you want that well-rounded resume though, because if you don't have necessarily that experience qualifications, it's like, hey, what else are you bringing uh, to the potentially to the position? Also, even from my own experience, there's times where you don't know what else that company might be looking for, especially like a smaller, medium-sized business. They might have something different that you might fit for, that if you're a good character hire or they feel that way, you just don't know. So I don't think there's any harm in doing that. I do think something I've seen, talked to a guy recently who had been laid off. And I asked him, I said, are you seeing a trend in some of those certifications for, he was looking for something more technology, IT driven. It's like, are you seeing a trend that these companies are asking for that? And is it something like, depending on the cost of it, is it something you can go get while you're looking for a job?
I agree. I think everything that they've already mentioned, I tend to encourage people to apply for positions, even when they think they don't specifically meet all of the qualifications. You'd be extremely surprised how a lot of interviewers and employers are connected within the community. We sit on different community boards, and you'd be so surprised at how you find someone who does not meet what you're looking for, but because you sit in a different seat in the community in some other endeavor, that they could be absolutely perfect for something someone else is looking for. So it's about taking the chance to sit down, have an interview, display what your characteristics are and what your values are. And a lot of times, if you do well in that situation, people will find a place for you to be, even if it's not in the seat of what they were looking for.
Thank you so much. So let's say we've gotten that interview. We're meeting face to face. What kinds of questions should applicants be asking during those interviews?
I would encourage applicants. I always tell candidates when I'm interviewing them, I try to leave the door open to say, okay, now why don't you interview me? Because at the end of the day, you have to also see if the corporation or the culture of the system is something that's going to match for you. So you want to ask questions like, what is the culture of this organization? How do you help people succeed? And what is your employment retention look like? Those are the things you kind of want to know. If they start to pause and say we have a lot of turnover every couple of months, you might want to just, pause a little bit and think about why. Maybe it's job fit, but you do want to ask, because a lot of times companies can look really shiny on the outside, but there's a culture issue on the inside, and you have to be able to ask those questions. And employers should be transparent. They could very well say, we're having a really tough time, we've had a lot of turnover, but we're looking to rebuild, and all of those things. And you might need to evaluate if this is something you want to kind of delve in at that point and see if it works for you.
In addition, I think questions centered around how does the organization support professional growth? I think that would let the hiring manager know and understand that you are willing to learn. You want to learn about the position. You want to grow within their company. You want to be there for a lifetime, right? You want to be a solid candidate. I also want to add too, I find with younger candidates that I get this same, sometimes this question a lot. And the question will be, what's your hiring time frame? Now, I'm okay with what is your hiring time frame if you've come before that with some great questions like Ms. Brown mentioned earlier, or like professional growth. I'm okay with that. So make sure you have some good, solid questions. And then I also like to give this one too. If by chance that your interview was just so amazing and you were able to talk about so many of, showcase your skill set in that interview, that you really do not have another question, I like to always add something to the effect of what we talked about so much in this interview. And I want to thank you so much for the opportunity. If I could just leave you with a few final thoughts on why I feel like I would be the best fit for your organization, and then you kind of go into some things that may not have been mentioned about you that corresponds with that position, or your strengths, then again, that takes a candidate who knows how to connect with strangers in the room and will feel comfortable with speaking out in an interview session. But that too can be another little twist if you really don't have any other questions. Turn it around to make it benefit you to get one last word in about why you should be the one that they pick.
Yeah, I would add to that and say that I think that there's a time and a place for there's nuts and bolts questions you need answered. But when we flip that around, do y'all start? And what, even if that has been overlooked already in the process, that's a very fair question. But I think you've really got to have something. I want to see that you're trying to sort out that it's the right fit at that point. So I think something more around the growth, the culture, asking who has helped you in your career at this company, at your company, who at ACS has helped you grow. And you can get a really good answer of like, does this company have a culture where growth is important? Or if the person hiring you doesn't have a good answer for that, I would say just come armed with something thoughtful before you get to the very necessary, but I'd say just sort of like the kind of plain questions around some of the more basic stuff.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I'm sitting here taking notes. Thank you. This is great. Let's see. All right, so we've talked about some really great stuff. I've been like smiling and nodding this entire time. But to sort of flip that, unfortunately, sometimes there are red flags in candidates. We never want to give off a red flag as an applicant or anything like that. So what would you say is one red flag that immediately gives you pause when you see an application, when you're speaking to someone in an interview or just interacting with them through the process? Have you all seen any red flags that sort of you take a step back?
I think all of us who have interviewed candidates have seen a red flag or two. And sometimes I don't know if it's necessarily a red flag. I always kind of attribute it to coaching, that they probably weren't prepped in advance in terms of how to create a resume, certain things that you don't necessarily need to put on there, extra wording. I'm not an English teacher, but I don't necessarily need to know your Facebook launch page and those kind of things. I think it's just a social media world. So it's not necessarily a flag, but it's more of a professional etiquette that you would hope to kind of coach people away from. So I always encourage people, if you have a resume, you're applying for a job, get somebody to look at it before you submit it. Find a peer, random somebody that might just want to have a second pair of eyes to give you some feedback before you submit it. And they often will pull out those red flags for you.
Red flags for me from an interview standpoint. If you're not able to hold eye contact with me, that's a little bit of a red flag for me. Maybe not giving me a firm handshake. Now, I can tell when someone's really nervous, but if someone just comes in and it's just like, oh, just another day, not dressed professionally, just not really prepared, not understanding or really able to talk about the position that you've applied for, or you've done a little bit of research about the organization as a whole, those are red flags for me. So again, I can really discern if someone's just downright, nervous. But if it's someone that's not prepared, lack of a firm handshake, eye contact, comes in with a good, clean, resume and understands and can talk about the position that they're applying for. If that's not there, then it's a small red flag for me.
I'd say pretty simple. In an interview, not being on time. I think that that's like one of those things of it's like, goodness, if we're gonna ask you to show up on time for work and you can't be on time for an interview. I always think some great advice I got early on was you should be your best version of yourself in an interview because employers are gonna know. I mean, about a year or so ago, I did an interview and I just, man, the poor guy was so down on everything. I was like, if he is this down on everything in an interview, I cannot imagine when he has a bad day in the field and his morning started with a flat tire on his truck, and then he got to the job site and the contact was running late, and then he didn't have the, it's like you stack a few of those things up. How's he going to react to the customer then if coming in for an interview, he's already sort of got this just negative outlook? And so that was a huge red flag for me. Is like I'm thinking you're going to be putting on your best self, knowing that everybody, kind of tempering that. Um, and so when you come in with sort of I'd say just sort of not engaged and sort of kind of, yeah, no, that's not selling yourself for the position at all.
I think that's key, what you just mentioned about selling yourself. You almost have to be very mindful about presentation, and not necessarily, what color you wore, but what kind of energy did I give off? Did I give off a vibe that I'm positive, that I can see things, the greater good when things are not always going well? Those are things that employers are looking for. And if you come to an interview and are completely downing where you've been and everywhere else you've been, it almost would give me a flag that you hadn't been able to make that into a lesson as opposed to a rant fest.
Very wise.
I know, I love that. I love that energy component. Yes,
Mhm.
great advice.
And we all have bad
Absolutely.
days. Nobody's a superhero on this panel. We have bad days, but we definitely know how to table them and present well when needed.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Definitely. And it's so important that applicants understand that really throughout this process, they are their best advocate. Hopefully, mom and dad and loved ones are not joining in the interview room. So our loved ones might have really great things to say about us, but they're not going in there with us too. We've got to say those good things.
Well, Abigail, real quick before we go to the last question, you brought up
Yeah.
a good point. Now, I
Hmm.
have been to recruitment events where parents attend
I've
with
heard.
their students. And so I'm sure the panel would agree with me that to me, that's kind of a red flag too. I'm not a fan, unless there's a need, of course,
Mm,
unless there's a need. But I'm not a fan of parents right there coming up to the table with me, with the candidate to talk about, the candidate. So leave the parents home, guys, if you can.
We had a request for somebody to come in for an interview and wanted to bring a parent into the interview. So they made it. So I would say that is just an absolute no. Even if you're one of our work study folks coming um, out of one of the technical schools, you got to do the interview on your own. But
you do.
I'm not joking. We really did have a young man interview for a warehouse, and his mom wanted to sit in. So, but that's a no.
I am quietly laughing because I had not had any of that experience, other than I have had an employee who was unfortunately terminated for time and attendance, and the parent wanted to come to ask for the job back. So I've never had it on the front end, but that's interesting.
I've been doing some reading lately, and it is a growing trend. So I think that's on our horizon. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Before we end out, I have one final question, and I welcome anyone to answer. It doesn't just have to be the few who have been leading the conversation. But if you could give students one piece of advice in 10 words or less, what would it be?
I would encourage students to, and it may seem a little non-conventional, but for this generation, I think that they will do great with this, is get your phone, find you a little tripod, have a friend, do some interview questions with you and record yourself. And then watch it back and see if there's anything that, do I fidget? Do I say and 17 times? Sometimes we don't know how we present until we watch ourselves. And that could be a great way for you to kind of perfect the craft of, when I go into an interview, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to slowly talk. I'm originally from New York. I talk really, really fast. And so I have to be mindful of the speed in which I speak and certain things. And so I would encourage students that if you have, stage fright or interview fright, just record yourself and watch yourself a few times. And believe it or not, you'll perfect it just like you would want to be doing it on the day of the event.
And that goes right into where I would say, after doing that wonderful practice time, making sure that you are prepared and authentic, and always follow up professionally. Some people forget about that little quick email or little note to follow up after the interview. So I think it's still something that is a plus when you follow up professionally.
I'd say load your resume into ChatGPT and ask it to ask you some interview questions based on your resume, or even say, hey, I'm applying for this position. Here's my resume. If you were interviewing me as a hiring manager, what kind of questions would you have? And you don't want to you want to make it your own, right? Don't come in with, but it would be a good way to practice and anticipate some things and have some thoughtful answers ready.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. I know that this is like prime lunchtime. So thank you for maybe delaying your lunch to have this conversation today. Um, those are all of the those are all the questions that we have prepped for today. Um, I haven't had any questions pop into the chat on my end, so I think our students have been doing a lot of listening and a lot of digesting and note taking. But once again, thank you all for being here today.
You are so welcome. You did a great job as a moderator.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
having us.
Bye.
Bye.